let's talk about really what is estrogen and progesterone doing in the female body. And we're going to talk about different organs. Start with the uterus. Estrogen stimulates the cell lining production. That's where, of course, the period comes from on a monthly basis. Cells are stimulated. Growth, the division of cells, that's what estrogen does. Progesterone, on the other hand, has this lining that has been occurring for 2 weeks in the cycle, or for probably about a week, week and a half anyway. So the lining is starting to form. Then progesterone, after the ovulation takes place, progesterone is produced and released from that corpus luteum, that little scar tissue from the ovary where the egg was released. Little tiny scar tissue, progesterone is made there. So for the first time in the month after ovulation, there is a rise in progesterone. It's the progesterone that matures the lining for the eventual implantation of the egg. In the ovaries, estrogen stimulates egg maturation. What that means is there's probably 1,000 eggs in each of the ovaries, and the estrogen, unopposed to the progesterone, is causing maturation, or those eggs are going toward the surface of the ovary. When an ovary, or when an egg is released, progesterone is formed, then the progesterone suppresses that egg maturation so you don't have several eggs released in the same month. That's the purpose of the estrogen and progesterone in the ovaries. In the breast, the estrogen stimulates tissue, stimulates division, sometimes causes some discomfort. Progesterone in the breast actually prevents cancer. Estrogen in the bones. It slows bone loss. And we're going to talk about this when we get into reasons for estrogen. We get into the follicular stimulating hormone and what it does after menopause. Progesterone stimulates new growth in the bone. In the thyroid tissue, estrogen interferes with the hormones of the thyroid. Progesterone helps the hormones, facilitates their function. So when we start talking about estrogen dominance later on, and if we have an interference with the thyroid tissue, the low thyroid symptoms include feeling cold, cold hands and feet. Metabolism is low, that's why the coldness. There is slower mentation, there's depression, the tendency to gain weight because the energy isn't being produced to burn that. Dry skin, dry hair, more brittle hair, hair falling out. Those are the low thyroid symptoms that will be more present when the estrogen levels are higher or there's estrogen dominance occurring in the body. Progesterone, like we mentioned, actually facilitates the functioning of the thyroid gland. So as we're going through this, think about, would I rather be on estrogen or would I rather be on progesterone? What are the things that are, what do I want in my life? What are my needs? Think about this. The brain. The estrogen does stimulate the function, makes the brain a little more sharp. Progesterone calms. It acts as a natural antidepressant. On the fat tissue, estrogen increases deposition. It's going to put it in the hips and the thighs and in the breast tissue. Progesterone burns fat much more than estrogen does. Testosterone, on the other hand, puts the weight, the fat, in the abdomen. So men tend to have the big belly gut, women tend to have the hips and the thighs. That's just because of the estrogen and the testosterone, the levels that are in the body, where the body chooses to put it. Estrogen creates progesterone receptors so that the progesterone that we've just been talking about functions better. All of the mechanisms that are taking place in our body are taking place because of either the estrogen or progesterone is hooking onto those receptor sites, or the energy, the frequency that's released from those hormones are getting close enough to the receptors that is triggering the reaction of those receptors. Progesterone upregulates the estrogen receptors. So when we talk about estrogen dominance, our first step is to use progesterone because Even when we need more estrogen, if we upregulate the estrogen receptors, we may not need to add estrogen itself and only may need progesterone. Estrogen increases retention of water. So estrogen-dominant women tend to have a little more swelling in their hands, or certain times of the month there's more swelling. That is the first half of the month, because now there's estrogen dominance relative to the very minimal amount of progesterone that's produced. And at the tail end, there's more progesterone, that dominance may reduce. Progesterone is a natural diuretic. Estrogen decreases libido, progesterone increases it. And a couple things that estrogen does that does not have the opposite that progesterone does, maintains the endothelial lining of blood vessels. So that's why for years the standard medicine philosophy has been that when you turn menopausal or if you lost your uterus and ovaries, then you need to be on estrogen to maintain the endothelial lining, improve blood vessel health. With the big study that came out, we're going to learn that, of course, the opposite is true with the fake estrogen, but real estrogen does this. It also increases the collagen production, so there's better healing. If we bruise our skin, we cut our skin after a surgery, then healing takes place from collagen tissue. Estrogen is part of that, faster healing, and is actually part of having a more elastic skin tone. Estrogen does that.